I'm Paul Cram, talking a little bit about the book Super Pumped, The Battle for Uber, written by Mike Isaac. The publisher of this is W.W. Norton and Company, and it was published on September 1st, 2020. Page count comes in at 416 pages. I myself listened to the audiobook version, and the narrator of it was Holter Graham. The audiobook comes in at about 12 hours, 52 minutes, so almost 13 hours there. And it was released on September 3rd, 2019. The genre that this book would fall under, it's nonfiction. It really delves into like social aspects with technology, some venture capital, and it really, really shows Silicon Valley, kind of a portrait of that space during the time it was written. I want to say, if I had to guess, let me see. Yeah, like the mid 2000s to like 2014. So I think it covers around like 10 years of history with Uber and Travis Kalanik, the founder. I always want to say too, is there any content warnings in this book? I mean, the book does touch on some really severe things. It does touch on rape, murder, a lot of violence in some ways, a lot of greed overall, and some rampant misogyny. One thing I want to mention here in this spot is all of this all the events that happen in the book, they really do predate the Me Too movement that really swept across America with Harvey Weinstein and all that. And the events in this book, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they kind of lead up to that space. So if you read the book and you're wondering, like, what the heck? Yeah. So I listened to the audiobook of this. I actually had to listen to this on Audible because Amazon doesn't really release their Audible content when it's like an Amazon Studio Audible thing that's created. And that's actually one of my gurs with Amazon, is they don't release it outside of their own platform. And sure, I can understand why they wouldn't release it to things like Libro, which is where I generally get my books in the audio format, because it's a competitor. What is frustrating to me, though, about Amazon overall is that the books and the audio things that they create and that content, they don't release it, at least not to my understanding, to libraries. And so libraries don't have access to their content, which, I'm not a fan of that. Here's a synopsis of the book. Hailed as the definitive book on Uber in Silicon Valley, Super Pumped is an epic story of ambition and deception, obscene wealth, and bad behavior that explores how blistering technological and financial innovation culminated in one of the most catastrophic 12-month periods in American corporate history. Backed by billions in venture capital dollars and led by a brash and ambitious founder, Uber promised to revolutionize the way we move people and goods through the world. What followed would become a corporate cautionary tale about the perils of startup culture and a vivid example of how blind worship of startup founders can go wildly wrong. So this book, my book club read it, and gosh, how this book made me feel was a little bit bored and kind of grossed out somewhat. Not necessarily like grossed out in the, I think of movies and stuff that gross me out, and a lot of it's like, where there's too much gore or blood. That's not what really grossed me out. What grossed me out in this one particularly was the behavior, and it kind of left me like, ugh. I can't think of who I would want to necessarily recommend the book to. So one of the questions I always like to ask in book club is like, who would you recommend this to? And this book, the only people that I would really recommend it to or have probably some interesting conversations about it on are people that work in tech. Though I could say people that work in like corporate environments might appreciate some of the kind of ins and outs that they kind of explain through the book, just of corporate culture and dealing with HR and some of those things. There were some things throughout the book that I thought were very intriguing and interesting. A couple of them, there's a few moments throughout the book where there's some corporate and governmental espionage kind of intrigue. Some of the tech that they specifically use to do some of the espionage is interesting. I might be using the word espionage wrong, but there's a little bit of whistleblowing. Actually, there's a lot of whistleblowing towards the end of the book, and I found that fascinating. I don't think that there would be a book without the whistleblower, really. It just would be a kind of dull. Who like read-alikes or movies that probably are similar to this? I haven't seen The Wolf of Wall Street, but I feel like this would be similar. Maybe something, or even like a Boiler Room kind of an idea, where it's that kind of ends justify the means type of work environment. Can't really think of any other books that are specifically like this. I don't really read, like even in fiction, I don't read a ton of corporate-based kind of even thrillers or anything. So, yeah. For anyone listening that doesn't already know this, Super Pumped they did do a TV series of this. I think Showtime did a series based on the book. I have not watched that yet. I might check it out. But I guess the bullet points, or maybe something that I'm thinking of was, it really does cover the history of Travis Kalanik, the founder, leader, CEO of Uber. So it does do a fairly good job of focusing on him and following his journey. Because I listened to the audiobook version, I would say that the narrator, he was really good overall. No huge, like, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is hard to listen to. He had a nice voice and he did a good job with it. A few quick initial thoughts I have on it. The writer, Mike Isaac, he really imposed a lot of his own views into the book. On one hand, I understand like that he's a tech writer, and a lot of this book is probably pieced together from pieces he's written. So, I can see where that would just be a little bit of a natural occurrence. I didn't love, though, like when there's instances of politics or even just humanity, like outside of tech, he really either really imposed his own viewpoint into it, or he just kind of glossed over it. I would say like the first instance of rape that's mentioned, he just kind of is like, yeah, this happened, and moving on. So here's what else was going on at Uber. And it just was an odd thing to me. It turned me off quite a bit. Yeah. The other piece, that political piece, like he really, in the sections towards the end, he really gives his own personal perspective on politics and, who was president and just different things like that, which I can see where he was providing a little bit of backdrop to what was going on with Uber and stuff. I was like, I'm not really digging the whole, felt really preachy, which wasn't that interesting to me. The book overall, it's not ultimately a beacon of hope for humanity. The protagonist, especially Travis Kalanik, he really lacks a moral compass, and he seems to not have learned too much about being kinder and more compassionate to humanity from his experiences. At least if he did, I didn't see it in the book, which kind of surprised me, because there's towards the middle end of the book, like his mom passes away, and it's really apparent and obvious that is impacting him. It just didn't seem to really change much, I guess, from what the author included and stuff. I was like, doesn't really seem like, he seemed like it impacted him, but maybe it just impacted him, and then it's kind of like, okay, anyway. I don't know. I thought that would potentially maybe be a moment or something where we would see some growth or something, and we didn't. Or at least I didn't. Uh, yeah. Money is talked about quite a bit in the book. My takeaway from reading this is it's like, wow, other than like providing for people, having a ton of money really doesn't seem like it helps. I don't know. I have to say too, like the board of Uber, they, spoiler alert, they do wind up towards the end, once there's a whistleblower and once things are kind of exposed and shown the culture within Uber. And it's not until the whistleblower comes along that the board takes notice of Travis Kalanik and kind of the company culture and just like the blatant raging misogyny and sexual harassment and things like that. And on one hand, I'm like, cool, they did do something, so good for them. There's just that piece in it, though, where it's like, you only did something because you were caught. Like, it wasn't important to you until you were caught. And while I can appreciate, with human beings, we all fail and we all will continue to do so, there's something about the board not taking action or not stepping in or not doing anything until then where it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It just is like, okay. Yeah. So that's unfortunate. It just turned me off quite a bit while I was reading. It turned me off a little bit to Travis Kalanik, who I'll probably never meet, but just Uber in general too. I was like, not really a fan. Throughout the book, I guess towards the end of the book is what I would say. I want to say, like, good on the whistleblower, Susan Fowler. Her story and her experiences and her willingness to share what happened to her. She was she was hired to do some of the programming. She was a tech gal, which is cool. And she worked at Uber for a year, and then she actually wrote a blog post and she posted it, and she just kind of laid out her experience there. And that's a little bit of a turning point in the book. Not a little bit, actually, a huge turning point in the book, huge turning point for Uber. But I want to commend her, good for her. Her writing that and sharing that did impact things, I think you could say, on like a social level and for society in a good way. She actually came out with a book, I believe this year, if I'm not mistaken. It's either 2021 or 2022, and the name of the book is called Whistleblower. And good on her. Like, there's an element of, Super Pumped is a best-selling book. It has a TV show made after it, all these things. And like I said, without her part in that story, there really isn't much of a story. So I commend her for writing a book and publishing it. Yeah, I'm hopeful. I might take a look at hers and see what it's all about and what it's like. I mean, her story really is what gives me hope for human beings in general. And I do appreciate in the book, she's really presented as smart, professional. So I'll have to take a look at her book as well. As always, I appreciate everyone that's listening. And if you check out Super Pumped, reach out to me and let me know. I'm always love to hear from people and get feedback and insight. You can find me online at iampaulcram.com. All right, everybody, let's keep being kind to each other.